Hello everyone, it's Ty. With Star Rail 4.1 being such a short patch, the second half is already very nearly upon us. And who should be rerunning but a certain sexy muddle-fudging cowboy? So today, I thought it a great opportunity to give a general overview of his kit, chat a bit about his gear, mention some of his teammate synergies, and give my free-to-play Husbando recommendation for Boothill. Boothill is a physical hunt break DPS who most people don't even remember exists. Having the unfortunate honor of being the character to release right before Firefly, he was immediately dismissed and forgotten. And that's a shame, because he really was a strong character. In his way. Using his skill, Boothill enters a special standoff state with a selected target. Like a Wild West duel, Boothill and the target lock eyes with each other for 2 turns. That sounded a lot more romantic than it probably should have. Anyway, during this time, Boothill deals increased damage to that target, and that target deals increased damage to him. But Boothill takes reduced damage from all other enemies. While in standoff, Boothill will use his enhanced basic attack, which has increased damage and increased toughness damage. If he breaks an enemy with this enhanced basic, or hits the enemy that's already broken, he does a huge hit of break damage that's increased by his stacks of Pocket Trick Shot. Pocket Trick Shot is gained by being in a standoff with an enemy when it dies or has its weakness broken. Overall, an interesting and very unique mechanic. Unfortunately, it's also his greatest weakness. In order to maximize damage, you have to have 3 Pocket Trick Shot stacks, which means having to be in standoff with 3 enemies that die or are broken. That takes up a lot of time at the start of a battle where you only have a limited amount of time to get things done in the first place. Also, his damage is basically negligible when the enemy isn't broken. So, if an enemy recovers from weakness break before he gets to hit them, he has to spend more time breaking the enemy all over again. And heaven help you if any of the enemies don't have physical weakness. Thankfully, his ultimate can help with some of that. It implants physical weakness on an enemy for 2 turns, and delays the enemy's action by 40%. It also does some damage, but that damage is just normal non-break damage, which he's really not good at. Even though he gains crit rate and crit damage scaling from his break stat, the vast majority of his damage profile is from break damage. So if he's not breaking, or the enemy isn't already broken, he's really not doing much. So you may see where I'm going here. When the stars align, he has 3 Pocket Trick Shots and the enemy is weakness broken, he does incredible damage per screenshot. Big, insane, millions of damage that could, back in the day, tear through a boss's health bar and gave Acheron pause. But building up to all of that was just such a slog that it was barely worth it. And that was back when break was in vogue. These days, not only have enemy HP bars inflated to monstrous proportions, but toughness bars have become rather bloated as well, making getting an enemy weakness break even more difficult without Wuan Mei, Fugue, and or the Dahlia to boost toughness reduction to a point where it's actually viable. And without someone to delay the enemies from recovering from weakness break, actually clearing a wave can start to feel like a Sisyphean task. And he's single target, so all of that work is only affecting 1 enemy. It's just a lot, and really not worth the trouble. So, unfortunately, my free-to-play Husbando recommendation would be that your pulls are probably better served being saved for someone else. We know the new blade is coming at the very least, and honestly, anyone who might come after him would probably be a better investment than Boothill. Obviously, this should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. If you want him on your account, and you have the pulls to spare without ruining your savings for someone in the future, then by all means, snatch him up. Husbando over meta, always. Just keep in mind that this will be his 3rd banner. While it's entirely possible that that means he won't be back for a while, he just as likely may end up in a free character selector in the Companion Spirit shop or as a 50-50 lost character selection in the future. It would be quite a waste to pull him and then have that happen, but you'll have to decide if you're willing to wait for that possible future. Now, if you have him already and you're considering further investment, maybe don't. His E1 is nice in that the extra pocket trick shot saves you a little of his ramp-up time, and the def ignore improves his damage, but it's not enough of an improvement that spending the pulls for it will make him a demonstrably better character. His E2 makes him better with SP and increases his damage a bit more, but really isn't worth it if you have his E1 already, and definitely isn't worth going to if you only have his E0. E4 just makes his standoff lean further to his favor as far as the whole dealing and receiving damage thing, and his E6 actually does make him a blast character and fixes some of his problems, but there's honestly no reason to be going this far if you're free to play, unless you're just super obsessed with Boothill. As for his signature, well, that one's a bit tricky. Because the only stats that do him any good are break effect and speed, the only light cones of use to him at all are his signature and the 4-star Shadowed by Night. Shadowed by Night at S5 is very nearly identical to his signature, lacking only 4% break effect and the 20% def ignore. In that light, his signature is certainly an upgrade over Shadowed by Night, but it's not big enough of one that it'll suddenly make up for everything else that's wrong with him. But then, Shadowed by Night requires pulling on the banner to get it. So, while I do not recommend spending your pulls when they can be saved for future hotness, if you really love Boothill and want him to have a light cone that actually does something, pulling on the banner for his signature, and either getting it or some copies of Shadowed by Night, might not be the worst idea, as long as you have enough pulls to still get whatever you may want in the future. And if you're deciding between his E1 or his S1, I'd say neither. Don't get either of them. Seriously, save your pulls for Blade or something. But then I'd begrudgingly point out that it sort of depends. If you at least have a copy of Shadowed by Night, E1 is a far more impactful choice. E1 together with Shadowed by Night at S5 gives almost exactly the same stats as his signature, but with that critical pocket trick shot to reduce his ramp-up time. However, if you don't have Shadowed by Night at all, then you are effectively running without a light cone anyway, so his S1 would be the better choice. Now, while you may have guessed that I don't think he's worth using the pulls on, there may be some of you who have him already or are going to pull him regardless, and maybe you want to hear a little about his gear and teams? Well, luckily Boothill is very easy to gear. Mostly. His best-in-slot set is 4-piece Iron Cavalry against the Scourge, the relic set literally created for Firefly. Just another slap in the face. While he doesn't have Super Break built into his kit like Firefly, he can still get the secondary effect with the help of Harmony MC or anyone who activates Super Break. For planers, his best option is Talia, Kingdom of Banditry, but he can use Forge of the Kalpagni Lantern when fighting enemies that have fire weakness, whether that's naturally or implanted by someone. His main stats are pretty simple as well. You'll want speed boots and a break effect robe. Everything else is basically irrelevant. The difficult and most important part is his substats. All he wants is break effect and speed. And speed, of course, is the rarest substat to roll. So any orb or chest with break and speed substats is his best. Finally, his team options are somewhat limited as a break DPS, as there are only a few break DPS teammates at all. Fugue, the Dahlia, and Ruan Mei are the best way to maximize his viability overall, but we're here for the free-to-play Husbando perspective, so we'll stick to that. For sustain, Gallagher, of course, is your best choice. His Besotted debuff increases break damage received, and he can really help whittle away at the toughness bars if the enemy happens to have fire weakness. But really, any sustain will do as long as they can keep everyone alive, as is their job. For supports, HMC is good for Super Break. Did I say good? I meant mandatory. HMC is mandatory for Super Break, since he's the only Husbando who can even activate Super Break, so he's basically a requirement for Boothill's damage. You can run Boothill without HMC, but you'd really be doing yourself a disservice. Since break damage isn't affected by damage bonus, you need Def Shred, Def Ignore, or Vulnerability to increase Boothill's damage. As such, Jiao Cho and Ashvale are great teammates. Welt too can improve Boothill's damage while also being a great Ruan Mei substitute. If you build him with Break Effect and Energy Regen to keep his ult available, he can help slow and delay broken enemies so that they don't recover. And while Sunday's buffs are overall useless to Boothill, his action advance can help Boothill ramp up faster, and the energy from his ult obviously helps Boothill keep his weakness implanted and the enemy's action delayed. Plus, if you happen to have Sunday's E1, he can in fact provide a bit of Def Ignore. Lastly, some unconventional suggestions. Anoxa is a fairly good pairing with Boothill. Not necessarily for his damage amp, which is basically non-existent, but simply for the weakness implant and toughness damage help that he can provide while also doing a fair bit of DPS. Frankly, it becomes hard to tell who's a sub-DPS for whom in a team like this, but as long as it leads to a clear, who really cares, hey? And Midday, oddly enough, isn't a terrible teammate either. Midday's taunt overrides the taunt from Boothill's standoff, so Midday can be used to keep Boothill from taking the massively increased damage from a strong enemy that he might end up otherwise taking. Not a situation you'll likely find yourself in often, but it can come in handy sometimes. There are plenty of Husbando puzzle pieces that you can use to put together a reasonable team for Boothill. Unfortunately, the best pieces will still be Firefly's coterie. Though Boothill is an oft-forgotten and neglected character, he's still pretty fun, albeit rather niche, and I really hate that he isn't as good as he ought to be. From being single target to having a really lengthy ramp-up time, he was forked from the start, with Firefly being the baseline for the break meta. Maybe someday he'll get a Nova Flare and it'll render this whole video bullshit, but until then, it's probably best that we let this old cowboy walk off into the sunset. And I've been going on so long that it's probably time that I do the same. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this sort of thing, please like and subscribe and hit that bell to be notified when I post more things of this or any other nature. If you have any questions or you want to show your appreciation or want to tell me how angry you are with something that I've said, then feel free to leave a comment down below. In any case, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all again next time. Bye!